Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Rachel and I am knitting. Not right now, but most of the time, and I have been knitting, so I'm going to tell you all about it. Today's video is episode 28 of my weekly podcast series, which is a series where I talk to you all about the projects I've been working on over the course of the previous week. So this week I'm going to talk to you about some knitting projects and some progress on my spinning wheel, and I think I'll also talk to you a little bit about some cast-on plans. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future podcast episodes. And with all of that said, let's dive in to episode 28. So I'll start with the project updates section of the podcast, as I always do. I have 6 projects to update you on. I have really been dipping my toes in a lot of different areas of my WIP pile over the course of the last week, and I have some FOs to share with you. So I'll start with I think my smallest FO. Last week I showed you my Dewdrops Cowl that I was working on in Comfy Cozy Couches, a colorway from the Cabin collection from Cesium Yarn. And as you can see, the cowl is now finished. This cowl is going to be for my grandmother. So now that I have this cowl done and this Travel Buddy cowl that I showed you last week done, I can ship these two together along with the puffin pin that I got my grandma in Shetland and get this package en route to my grandma. So get it out of my house, get it into her house and into her hands and on her neck. But yeah, this is a really quick knit. And in fact, I have another one on my needles, which I'll tell you about shortly. If you're new here and you haven't heard me talk about it, I feel kind of insecure to talk about it, talk about things that I talk about regularly, because I feel like those of you who are regular viewers will just feel like I'm a broken record, but I hope not. But anyway, if you're new here, this is my own pattern. It's going to be my first published pattern. Well, like I published patterns on Etsy like 10 years ago, but this will be my first published pattern on Ravelry. It's a pattern that I worked up years and years and years ago, both a cowl and a headband and a hat too, but I don't currently have the hat pattern finalized or in testing, and I don't know if I ever will, but the cowl and the headband are both for sure happening. So anyway, this is done for my grandma, and I mentioned last week she has a red hat in the same stitch pattern, the hat that I mentioned that I've made a pattern for, but who knows if it will ever be published. So I'm thinking that this will make a really nice set for her. This red is inspired by the red couches at our family cabin, which in my mind are like brand new couches, but in reality they're like 15 or 20 years old. But yeah, this red is actually a perfect match for those couches at the cabin. I've never seen a yarn match its inspiration picture so well as this colorway does. So really impressed by the very talented people over at Cesium Yarn, Kat and Penny Strickland. If you haven't shopped Cesium Yarn for yarn or fiber, I highly recommend. And whenever their dyed to order library is open for orders, you can place orders for Comfy Cozy Couches, carpet, or any other colorway from the Cabin collection. So there's a little unexpected plug for the Cabin collection to round out my Dewdrops Cowl. Actually, it's not rounded off yet. Rounded off, whatever. Because I made some modifications to this edition of my knitting the pattern. And by modifications, I mean I knit 2 extra rows of ribbing because I forgot how numbers work. So then since the cast on had 2 extra rows of ribbing, the cast off did as well. And I think I also added maybe 2 extra rows of the lace pattern repeat. So it's a little bit longer than the standard size in the pattern, but that's fine with me. And this is how much yarn I have left over of my skein of Comfy Cozy Couches. This is from a worsted weight skein. And in fact, let me weigh this right now. Okay, so I have 8 grams left over. So that means that this version of the cowl with the modifications that I made used 92 grams of yarn. So a great one skein project. Okay, so that's the first project update. The second project update is also a finished object, and I'm so excited that it's a finished object because how long has this been on my needles? I want to say since January. Let me look at my Ravelry project page. March, not January. But this is my Azucena by Claudia Quintanilla, and it's done. I'm really happy with this and how it turned out. I haven't tried it on since I blocked it, and even like when I'm feeling this right now, I don't think it's fully dry, but I'll still try it on for the podcast. I'm just so happy with this. I did make some modifications to the pattern. I'm coming back, don't worry, but I wanted to back up to show you. In the pattern, it calls for not only color work on the yoke and the collar, but also for corrugated ribbing on the cuffs and hem, but that didn't really speak to me, and I didn't really want the color work on the hem or the cuffs either, because I really wanted to have the yoke be the focal point and be the showstopper of this garment. So I opted to just knit plain stockinette in my main color on both the end of the body and the end of the arms, and I'm really happy with the result. Another modification that I made when knitting this pattern is I did a tapered sleeve as opposed to kind of a balloon sleeve that's called for in the pattern. So my decrease rate and all that you can find on my Ravelry project page. As with many of my projects, there's a lot of information that I put into the project pages. So if that's ever something that you're interested in, or you're like hungry for more data or information on what I did and I haven't clearly addressed it in a video, you can always check the Ravelry project page. I may have added more information there. I may not have, but it's worth a check. So decrease rate for the sleeves you can find there, and the number of rows I knit, etc. But really happy with this. I used yarn that was sent to me from Knit Toronto, which is Claudia Quintanilla's yarn store that she owns. So this yarn was gifted. I also have a code for the pattern to be 50% off for you. I keep forgetting to mention this when I talk about this on the channel, so I'll say here, I believe the code is still active. If not, I apologize, but if you use the code Rachel Azucena on Ravelry, you'll get 50% off the pattern. So I really enjoyed this pattern. I didn't find any errors. There were no portions that had me scratching my head and confused what the pattern was trying to get me to do. So I definitely recommend this pattern, especially if you like color work, especially if you like a halo knit. You can see the halo on the garment because this is knit with one strand of fingering weight and one strand of mohair. And I was going to tell you this, but then I got sidetracked. But as I said, the yarn was sent to me at no cost to me, and it is Gepard Kid Seta and Gepard Kid Silk, I want to say. I'll put it on the screen if I've totally misremembered what the yarn is. But yeah, really happy with this knit. And without further ado, let me show you what this looks like on my body. All right, there you go. I made that clip a little longer than I have done in the past because someone commented on one of my recent videos and said they wish that I would just linger a little bit longer so they can really see how a garment is sitting. So I hope that was long enough. If not, let me know. But there's the Azucena, and it's all done. I'm really happy that it's done, and I'm looking forward to wearing this. I think that it will get a lot of wear, and it's very warm also, which is interesting because both the mohair and the fingering weight are a silk blend yarn. And so in my mind, I think, okay, silk blend, that should be a cool fiber, a cooler yarn, right? But for whatever reason, I don't think that that is going to be the case with this. Maybe it's because it's the lace weight held with the fingering weight, so maybe that coolness of the silk is canceled out by the quantity of yarn strands being held together, or just the nature of mohair being held with it. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely not a cool weather knit for sure. I'm wondering though if I had made a garment with just the fingering weight, the silk wool blend fingering weight, maybe if that would be a nice summer garment. I don't know, but that's something that I could explore maybe in the future. I don't have enough yarn left to make another garment. I have a full cake of both the contrast color fingering and the contrast color mohair, as well as the leftovers of the first cake I used, and that's just by nature of omitting the color work on the sleeves and the bottom of the body. And I also have 2 leftover cakes, full intact cakes, each of the main color fingering and the main color mohair lace, and then also partial cake of each of the main color fingering and main color mohair. So I have leftovers that I can play with, but not enough to make a garment. So happy with this. Glad that I'll be able to put this into FO status instead of WIP status on my Ravelry project page. I sometimes look at my Ravelry project page like bird's eye view and get a little overwhelmed by all of the WIPs. So I'm really happy and proud of myself for just, I don't know, hunkering down and getting this done. I was trying to focus on WIPs this weekend, even though I wanted so badly to cast on a new sweater, which I'll also tell you about shortly. So I figured I would just put my head down and focus and get to work and get as much project progress done as I could on my current WIPs before I added a new WIP into the pile. And I'm very, very happy that I finished my Azucena. I don't think I finished anything else on my WIP list, but I made progress on them. So with that said, let's move on to the next project update, which is my Gepard Orca. I don't have it with me because it is currently in a blocking bath, the first of several, or no, the second of several. I don't know if you remember this, but a few weeks ago, maybe a month or more ago at this point, I don't know, a while ago, I was talking to you about the Gepard Orca, which is a blue orca stuffed animal that I'm knitting with yarn from a collection called the Gepard collection, which is inspired by the pod of orcas that live off of Orcas Island off of the Washington coast. Like the yarn is a beautiful color, but the transfer of the dye is egregious. When I was knitting this orca, when I was knitting with this yarn, particularly the dark blue yarn, I'm using one dark blue and one lighter blue for contrast for the orca instead of the, black and white that is found in nature. Particularly with the dark blue yarn, when I was knitting it up, I got blue dye on my hands. The transfer was so much more than any dye transfer to my skin that I've ever experienced when knitting with yarn. So that was really disappointing. And then when I went to block some of the finished pieces for this orca, the problem of the dye bleeding and transferring was even more apparent. It was really, egregious is the word to use. It was egregious. And I rinsed and washed and agitated this knitted up piece as much as I could, like multiple times. I think at least 7 times I washed it. And the runoff of the water from these knitted pieces was so vibrant and so blue, even after multiple washes. So, if you remember, I was so fed up. I was so disappointed with this knitting and yarn experience, to the point where I just wanted to throw the project away. I just wanted to get rid of it because I thought it doesn't make sense to gift this finished piece to someone, because what if, for instance, what if I gave it to someone who just had a baby and it was a present for the baby, and they put this in the crib or like on the carpet, and it stains the carpet, or it stains the baby's clothes, or like the dye gets on the baby's skin because this dye is not set. I would not be able to live with the anxiety associated with that. So I was like, that's out. I didn't want to keep it myself. It just was bad. It was really bad. But clearer heads prevailed, and I ultimately decided that I would finish knitting the orca, and before finishing, like to the point of seaming it, by finish I mean I would knit all the pieces. Then I would put all the pieces in a citric acid dye, or a white vinegar, not citric acid dye, a citric acid bath, or a white vinegar bath, to provide some acid to the fiber to help set the dye. So anyway, over the weekend I finished knitting the pieces of the orca, and now all that it needs is to have the dye set, and then all the pieces seamed together. So today I brought out my dye pans from my craft room closet, and I filled one up with water, put it on the stove, and I was going to go get some citric acid from the laundry room. And I found no citric acid, because the little container that I thought was citric acid is actually borax or boric acid. I know they're not interchangeable, but it's not citric acid. So obviously that wasn't going to work. Or at least I assume that's not going to work. I don't think that you can sub borax for citric acid. So I also found that we were out of white vinegar. So I currently just have a dye pan on my stove full of water with no acid in it and no knitted pieces in it. So maybe later today I'll go get some citric acid, but frankly I hate leaving the house. So I don't know if I will. I might consolidate that to another day when I have to leave the house by default. So, yeah. So currently, anyway, all that to say, currently the knitted pieces for the orca are in a plastic tub in a bathroom, because I thought, okay, I don't have acid, I don't have vinegar, so therefore I will maybe use some dye catcher sheets that I bought ages ago, and I'll put that in a wool wash bath with the knitted pieces, and maybe the color catching sheets will solve my problem without me having to leave the house to get citric acid. Well, that didn't work. 3 color sheets later, and the water is still a vibrant blue. It's just ridiculous. It's absurd. So, yeah, right now they are sitting in there, and then after I film this, I will probably, I don't know, get the excess water out and lay them flat to dry, and then get them wet again once I have citric acid or white vinegar to attempt to set the dye. And if that doesn't work, I gotta tell you, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm probably just gonna throw this project away, because just absolutely absurd and disappointing. So, yeah. Those are my thoughts. But I did make progress on my Gepard orca, and it would be wonderful if that works out and I can get the dye to set so I can have a cute little whale stuffed animal. That would really make me happy. So I'll keep you posted on that. But there you go. There's an update on my Gepard orca, another one of my WIPs that I worked on over the course of the weekend. The other project that I worked on, the fourth in this lineup for this week's project updates, is my sea glass sweater, and true to form, I forgot to bring it into my craft room before I started filming, so stand by, let me go grab it. All right, here we have the sea glass sweater. This is designed by Wool and Pine Designs, and it's just so beautiful. This is maybe one of the most beautiful things I've ever knit, and there's only one strand, well, two strands of purple in it. But even when you look at it, the overall vibe is not purple. And I am still just in love with the fabric that this is making. If you're not familiar with the sea glass pattern, this sweater pattern is a DK weight pattern. They also have a fingering weight version, which is more of a T. But this is the DK weight version, and essentially it's 1x1 color work all over the body and the sleeves of this pattern. So the idea behind this is that you can use this as a stash busting project. You can use all sorts of colors in all sorts of combinations. There's really no way to go wrong with the yarn you choose for this pattern. You can hold fingering double, you can hold lace together, you could do worsted in some areas, just like this is a dumping ground, a melting pot for all of your bits and bobs, odds and ends. But if you want to go against the spirit of that and buy new yarn for it like I did many, many years ago, you can do that too. So I purchased this, when would this have been? 2022? So okay, 2 years ago, that's not that long. Was it 2022? It was either 2022 or 2021 when Long Dog Yarn, Brandy, had her first Princess Bride collection, or at least the first Princess Bride collection in recent memory. She's since re-released it with some additional colors, but this is from the version of the collection a few years ago. And what I'm doing to create this fabric is, instead of switching colors, both colors every row, I'm using one color as essentially the main color. I'm using it every row, and that's Cliffs of Insanity, which is this very subtly variegated gray color. It's a nice neutral. So I have Cliffs of Insanity held on every single row, and then I'm alternating it with every other colorway from the Princess Bride collection. And as you can see, I have an order to this. So for instance, if we start here with yellow, we've got yellow, and then pink, and then blue, and then purple, red, blue, green, pink. Okay, so you just can kind of see, I hope, how that's working. The Cliffs of Insanity is on every row, but it's alternated each row. So each row is offset by one stitch. So you kind of create this really pretty mosaic fabric. So I whipped this out over the weekend, and I got a few rows in. The last time I think that I mentioned this on the podcast, I said that I had reached sleeve separation, but I hadn't tried it on yet. And either Selena or Abby, I can't remember, one of the wonderful people behind the duo that is Wool and Pine, watched and messaged me and said, your sea glass is looking great, but we definitely recommend that you try it on before you keep going with sleeve separation, because sometimes people need a deeper yoke than what's written in the pattern. So definitely try it on. And so who am I to argue with the designers of the pattern? So I did. I put this on extension cords and I tried it on, and sure enough, the yoke was just a little bit too shallow, a little bit too tight under the armpit. So that was enough for me to say, okay, I'm going to put this in timeout because I'm not equipped. I do not have the tools required to handle this setback right now. It's just too much for my poor heart. So I put this in timeout. And then on a later occasion, or maybe that same time I tried it on, I don't know, I did rip back the few rows that I had worked after sleeve separation. So when I pulled it out this past weekend, I didn't have the sleeve separated, it was just the circular yoke. So I knit an additional 7 rows. So that for me is just about an inch, a teeny bit over an inch with my unblocked gauge, past what I had knit and what the row count is called for in the pattern. And then also this past weekend, I separated sleeves for the second time in the days of knitting this garment. And now I'm on the first, I finished the first row after sleeve separation. So I'm really fresh after sleeve separation. And I have to say, I'm so glad to be after sleeve separation because this, before sleeve separation, took forever to complete a row. I was knitting on this in the evening, one of these days of the weekend. I looked at the clock, it was like 9:45, and then I knit a row and I looked at the clock and it was 10:23 or something. So it was just like a long time to knit a row. Or maybe that was 2 rows. I don't know. The point is, it felt like a long time. So I'm very pleased to be done with sleeve separation. Now, there's a couple things about this project that are really burning my butt. And if I could change, if I could snap my fingers and make it so reality was different than it is, I would do that. The first thing I would snap my fingers for to change is the needles that I'm using. I'm using bamboo needles from Chiagu. Chiagu is my favorite needle brand. I use their needles religiously. I love Chiagu needles. And this set of needles is actually part of an interchangeable set that Chiagu sent me for a giveaway that I partnered with them on. So they sent me a set and I gave away a set to one of my followers on Instagram. And so I took the opportunity to try the bamboo interchangeable set. Now there's a lot of interesting things about this set. For instance, the joins on the needles are twists. So I don't know if you can tell, but the metal join from the interchangeable tip to the cable is totally on a swivel. It just spins around. I think it's difficult to demonstrate that maybe. So that's pretty cool. But I hate metal, or no, I love metal needles. I hate these. I hate bamboo needles or wood needles or whatever these are. They're just not my preference. They're too dull. They're not sharp enough for my preference, and I don't know. I feel like maybe this was the wrong yarn choice for them, because maybe with like a slippery yarn or a comparatively slippery yarn, this would have been a much better match to knit a garment with bamboo needles. But it's just like it's not making me happy. So that is making it difficult. It's not fun to knit with these for me. Whereas if this project were on metal needles, I think I would reach for it more or be less reluctant to reach for it. So yeah, but I don't want to switch my needles because I think my gauge is a little tighter with the bamboo needles. So I feel like if I switch now, I may have a different gauge than I have for my yoke. So I don't want that. So that's just kind of a shame. Another thing about these bamboo needles is I kind of need some super glue, I think, because if you look at this bamboo needle, this is giving me constant grief. It's like it comes apart a little bit from the join, which I don't think is normal. See? I don't think that's supposed to happen. So maybe if I had some super glue or something, I could get that secure, but it's really obnoxious. Really just burns my butt up. So that's not my favorite. And the other thing is there's a lot of ends. So this will be my waking nightmare, probably, when this garment is complete. So anyway, I've tied these ends thus far together. I know you'll be horrified to hear that if you're like so anti-knot, but I tie all of my ends. I tie knots on all of them, whether I weave them in or not. I tie them in knots. Whatever. Okay, so that's what I do. And anyway, you can see here, this gap at my beginning of round, these are the rows where I haven't tied the ends together yet to secure them. So the fabric having this gaping hole is kind of annoying and requires constant yarn management. To say nothing of the constant yarn management that is required when you're switching colors every row. I don't know how people knit this pattern when they switch both colors every row, because I'm only switching one color every row because the Cliffs of Insanity is consistent throughout. But oh my goodness, what a nightmare that is. But it's looking so good, and I know that when it's done, I will look at that in awe regularly and think, oh my gosh, I made that? My hands made that? That is going to be a huge ego boost. So of course I'm chasing that carrot. I want to reach the finish line on this. And I'm glad that I pulled it out. I'm glad that I got to a milestone. In last week's podcast, I was talking about how I'm desperate for a checkpoint knit where I have something to look forward to. And splitting for sleeves was a huge checkpoint for this project. So the next checkpoints, plural, will be finishing the body and then doing the sleeves. So I'll keep you updated on that. That leads me to the next project update, which is my Doppio sweater. I don't have it. I don't see where I put it. I put it somewhere. I cleaned my craft room over the weekend as well. It was a very productive weekend. But I don't know where I put the Doppio. But I'll just tell you as an update, I'm not adding length to the sleeves. Okay? I said that I didn't know if after I put elastic in the neckband, if I would need to add length to the sleeves. Well, guess what? I don't care. I put elastic in the neckband and I think the sleeves are still fine. They might be just like the teensiest bit short, like a centimeter short. But I don't care. I just don't care. So the Doppio's done. And that's final. And then last but not least for project updates is another Dewdrops Cowl. So I told you I would tell you about the one I cast on. This is actually the Dewdrops Cowl that I wanted to cast on September 1st when testing started, but I couldn't find the correct size needle tips for the DK weight cowl. And I really wanted to use my skein of Hedgehog Fibers Tweedy. This is in the colorway Lullaby. But I couldn't find the correct needle tips for the ribbing for the DK weight cowl. But yesterday when I cleaned up, I found them. So I cast this on and I'm working away on my first sample of the DK weight Dewdrops Cowl. We've got the right side here and then the wrong side here. And the wrong side is actually my preference for what faces outward. So working away on this, I'll probably have this done this week because it's such a quick knit. But with that, those are my 6 projects that I've been working on, made progress on, and in the case of the Dewdrops Cowl in Comfy Cozy Couches and the Azucena, I have finished objects to show for it as well. So it's been a really good week for my crafting and my crafting progress. Now, let's move to the next section of the podcast, which is cast on plans. I didn't have this in last week's podcast because I didn't want to give away the yarn that I was going to show on the 3rd episode of Save My Stash, which is an Instagram live series that I do with Leslie of Knit California, where we switch off. One person shows yarn, the other person finds the perfect pattern to work that yarn up into. So this is the yarn that I had on my brain last week that I wasn't going to show you because I didn't want to spoil the surprise for Leslie, and I didn't want to give her a cheat sheet for our Save My Stash episode that happened this past Friday. So anyway, cast on plans. I showed Leslie this sweater quantity that I have. I have 8 skeins of this in total. So the 4 that I just held up, and then there's 4 also on my yarn wall behind me. But this is yarn from Clockwork Fiber Co, which if you've watched my channel, you're probably aware that I love Clockwork Fiber Co yarn. This is the Analog DK base, which is a 100% untreated American wool. It's a Shanico fiber, which is a blend of merino and rambouillet. It's DK weight, 3-ply, 240 yards per 100 grams, and this is in the colorway Elusive Mermaid. And this yarn was sent to me as promotional material for Clockwork Fiber Co. in in service of my role as an affiliate for Clockwork Fiber Co. So this yarn has been on my mind, and I've just been dying to get more Shanico on my needles. I love Shanico. I love spinning the fiber. I love knitting the yarn. I have not yet I have not yet knit with the yarn I've spun from Shanico fiber, which is actually, where is it? On my yarn wall somewhere. There, up in the top, right here. Yeah, so I haven't, I keep wanting to say I haven't spun it. I did spin the fiber into yarn. I haven't knit the yarn yet. But oh my gosh, Shanico is so, so good. I really love it. I highly recommend Shanico. If you have a dyer you love that carries it, please do yourself a favor and give it a try. I know that Clockwork Fiber Co. is not the only dyer that carries Shanico. I know Cesium Yarn has Shanico fiber, and I believe yarn as well. But anyway, like, poke around, see who has it. Definitely give it a try. It's so, so good. Okay, I have a sweater quantity. I really want to knit this up. I want Shanico on my needles. I want the joy of knitting with Shanico. So, what to make with this? Through the tutelage, no, that's not the right word, through the wisdom, through the guidance, through the recommendation, through the process of the Save My Stash episode, Leslie suggested a lot of different cabled cardigans, and they were all beautiful, but ultimately we agreed that really what this is begging to be knit up into is the Winter's Beach cardigan by Andrea Mowry. This has been on my radar for a while, probably ever since it came out, because I follow Andrea Mowry, I knit her patterns, I like her patterns, I trust her patterns, I've made many of them, and I know what or how I may need to modify or what size to knit for my preference, so it just makes sense, okay? Just makes sense. So I've known about the Winter Beach cardigan for a while, but I've always thought, that looks pretty, but it's not for me. It's just not for me. It doesn't speak to me. Until one day, I saw a sample, or not a sample, I saw a project shared on Instagram, I think from Lisa Sisk's mom. So one of the owners of This Is Knit, the local yarn store in Dublin, she shared her Winter's Beach cardigan, and oh my gosh, it was so pretty. The length, the fit, it just worked so well, and seeing that switched my mentality and made me say, okay, maybe the Winter's Beach cardigan is for me and I need to knit it immediately. So that didn't happen because I didn't knit it immediately, but I am going to knit it soon, and I'm going to knit it in this color. I do feel that this is like a fun, casual, silly, goofy color. Like, wearing this color of purple doesn't communicate I'm boring, I'm serious. Blah. To me, this color and wearing it would communicate I'm fun, I'm a free spirit, I'm lighthearted, I'm kind. Okay, that's the vibe I get from this color. So I'm interested to see how that will translate when knit up in a cabled cardigan, because to me, a cabled cardigan oftentimes communicates I'm serious, I'm professional, I know what I'm doing. So that vibe paired with the vibe of this color, which is a little bit more casual, I feel like it will be good. I feel like it will look good. I feel like it will be a good balance of serious and fun. I'm hoping so. I'm really hoping so. But I'm really excited to get this on my needles. Leslie said that this is not a good idea for Ireland, and I agree with her. I think she's right. It's not a good idea for Ireland. It's a complicated pattern. It's knit flat. It's cables all over. It's not a good idea for Ireland. And also, I think that this is a project I'm going to take with me to Ireland. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. But of course, as with everything, subject to change. Maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll think, this is not the yarn for that pattern, but right now I feel so excited about it, and I might cast that on this week. I have another cast on plan. I kind of want to get a little bit more into gift knitting, and I was thinking of yarn that I have caked up in my stash, and I was thinking that I could make another sacred sheep hat. So I have a skein. These are all cakes of Cascade 220 in different colors. And I also have a hank of a blue and a hank of a white, or like a cream or natural, in my yarn stash. So I was thinking a sacred sheep hat with this green as the brim, and then the black, and in fact, let me just get the white. The black and the white, or the black and the natural, as the colorwork motif for the crown. I think that would look really, really good and would be a really good gift knit to somebody. I don't know who yet. And then I was also thinking, okay, I'll have more black left over and more white left over, so what if I did another one with this mustard yellow as the brim? That would be cute too, right? So I'm thinking those would be good cast on plans, a good purse project. So that's on my horizon, but I don't know when, because I'm still, like, the motivation is not as intense, but I'm still kind of liking the idea of whittling down my WIP pile before I cast a new thing on. I don't think that is like a requirement for anybody, myself included, but right now that's just the mood I'm in. So I'm just trying to ride that wave until it crashes and I cast on multiple things in a day. So those are two cast on plans I have. And with that, let's move to the spin diary section of the podcast. I am officially 3/4 of the way done spinning my braid from El D'Amato, or my El D'Amato, which is a yarn spinning fiber hand knit garment shop in Lerwick of the Shetland Islands. Let me cut in a clip here so you can see what my bobbin looks like, but I'm having a great time spinning this up. I mentioned this a few weeks ago that I am a little surprised because I thought the spinning experience for Shetland wool would be a little different. I think maybe I just had too high expectations. It's not an unpleasant experience at all. It's just not the, I don't know, idyllic experience that I was expecting it to be, or that I thought it would be based on what I've heard from other spinners about Shetland wool. So let me bring you back to me, and I'll just say I'm enjoying this. I'm looking forward to plying this yarn up and knitting it up, and I'm not sure what I'll knit it up into yet, but it feels good to have something on my wheel, an active spin project going, and I'm looking forward to showing you the end result. Okay, so that's it for the spin diary. Next we have the acquisition section of the podcast, a big fat nothing. Nothing to show you, so we'll keep moving on. Let's go to the announcement section of the podcast. Also, a big fat nothing. Nothing really is happening except the stuff that's always happening, so that's pretty much all I have to say. And with that, that's really, isn't it? Yes, all I have to say. So why keep going? There's no reason to, because I've told you everything that you need to know. Gone over project updates, talked about cast on plans, talked about the spin diary. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I simply just don't know what it is. So I'll leave you to go about your day. I hope that it's a great one. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and hit that notification bell to be notified of my next upload. Last but not least, head over to Instagram and follow me at Rachel is Knitting if you don't already. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.